Well, let's return now to the announcement that £50 million in funding has been allocated to grammar schools in England so they can take on more pupils. Joining me in the studio is Sam Butters, the Chief Executive of the Fair Education Alliance, which is opposed to the expansion, and from Birmingham, Heath Monk, the Executive Director of the schools of King Edward VI in the city, some of which are grammars. Welcome to you both. Sam, to you first of all, you don't agree with this expansion. Tell us why.
So our aim as the Fair Education Alliance is to improve education for the most disadvantaged pupils across the UK. So we welcome the intention, but unfortunately this is exactly the wrong policy to achieve that aim. Firstly, there are much better ways to spend that investment to improve education for young people, but more critically, this policy is actually detrimental to the most disadvantaged pupils, and there's evidence to show that.
Heath Monk, do you disagree? I presume you do with that. What's your view on this expansion of grammar schools?
I do. I think it's an important policy because it comes with a commitment from grammar schools to open places to disadvantaged students. That's something that we've been doing in Birmingham for the last few years now. 20% of our places are reserved for children eligible for pupil premium. And bright disadvantaged students don't always make the progress they should in secondary schools. And our hope is that this funding will mean that more grammar school places go to children that can benefit them. I fully agree with Sam that what we do need to do is make sure that disadvantaged children get the start in life that they deserve.
Sam, isn't it a way to help bright disadvantaged pupils that might not otherwise have had access to this type of education?
I think the critical point is we know two things from the areas that do have grammar schools in the UK so far, is that pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds are less likely to get into the grammar schools. And secondly, we know that the gap is bigger in total outcomes in the areas overall. So actually, the kids that are not getting into grammar schools and are going to the comprehensives are doing worse than they would in an area that just had equal comprehensive access to all.
Why are they less likely to get into grammar schools?
So the gap in educational outcomes, as I'm sure Heath is aware, opens up before primary school, at early years, and then into primary. And what we need to be doing is ploughing resource and investment into providing a great education for every young person, no matter their background, throughout the whole education life cycle. What we have is a situation where we're not investing in the right areas, so we're ending up with a split system at the age of 11 and making it worse with the grammar school system.
Heath Monk, do you understand that people might say, why direct money at selective schools when teachers in state schools are crying out for the lack of funding, saying that they simply aren't able to cope?
I completely understand that, and I think what we need in education is more investment. I think schools are crying out for funding to do the best job by children. But if I come back to what Sam said, I think we've got to make efforts as selective schools to change our admissions criteria. So we do have a lower pass marking effect for disadvantaged children, which reflects that poorer start in life, potentially, weaker outcomes from a young age. But children that have potential to be incredibly successful. Now, in Birmingham, I don't think we do have that detrimental effect in other schools because it's a smaller number of children that go to grammar schools, and therefore the effect on the surrounding areas is less extreme. But I think some of this is about the design of the admissions criteria. It's about the way that schools work together. So I think a lot of the criticisms that Sam makes are fair, and I understand why many people would go along with them. But we need to use this funding as an opportunity to actually change the way that grammar schools work.
So are you saying that there should be a lower criteria for children from disadvantaged backgrounds in terms of their selection?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're looking at potential, and I think we have to recognise that children that haven't had the opportunities that the more affluent children have had, that maybe haven't had coaching, that have maybe been to primary schools where they haven't been supported and challenged in the same way. We have to do outreach work to persuade them they want to apply, and potentially we are looking at potential. So it's not just about the ability you have when you come and sit that 11 plus, it's what we can see in your future. So yes, we do think that a lower pass mark is essential. We've been doing this for a few years, And the evidence from our schools is that those children that have come from disadvantaged backgrounds on a lower pass mark are doing just as well as those from more affluent areas with a higher mark on the 11 plus. So we're trying to fulfil that potential and give those bright disadvantaged children opportunities that they may not otherwise have.
Sam, do you welcome that, or do you potentially see that as perhaps setting up pupils for failure if they're graded on a different level entirely?
I mean, I think the key point there is really there's still the children who don't get in even with that lower pass mark, and we're almost creating a system for the few rather than for every child. And you know, there are great examples across the UK where there isn't a grammar school system, and we are investing into schools across all the comprehensives, meaning that every child, no matter what their background, can get the great education they need. And that's what we would call this investment to go into, rather than rather than a split system for two groups of people.
And Heath, if everyone is clamouring to get their children into grammar schools, what happens to those children left behind in the comprehensive system?
Well, Sam's absolutely right. We need an education system that works for all. And you know, this city is full of fantastic comprehensives that do very well by the children that go to them. And this shouldn't be an either or. I think this is, you know, we believe that grammar schools play a part in the system, but it shouldn't be the only part or the most important part. We just do a job.
How do you stop the